The key is when you're thinking of these alternatives, are you thinking of them as replacements that justify restricting and eliminating fossil fuels? Or are you thinking of them as supplements that are going to add to fossil fuels? Or are you thinking of them as experiments? So I think right now, solar and wind are mostly in the position of experiments. So they have not done a good job so far of even supplementing fossil fuels. In most places they're used, the prices go up. And the basic reason is because they're unreliable. So they can go near zero at any time, which means you have to pay for the solar and wind infrastructure, including all the panels and turbines, but also the long distance transmission lines. But then you still have to pay for the reliable energy infrastructure. And if you skimp on that, which Texas has done, at a time of increasing demand, you also skimp on things like weatherization, then what's going to happen is when you have an adverse weather event, you're not going to have much sun, you're not going to have much wind, and you didn't have as much reliable capacity. So even as experiments, they are having big problems, and as modest supplements. But then if you're talking about them as replacements, that's insane because the world needs far more energy. So the idea of talking about reducing fossil fuel use from an energy perspective means guaranteeing, billions of people will be impoverished. So it's not necessarily that you're pro fossil fuels and therefore anti solar and wind. You should be anti, I think, forced solar and wind, which I am. And you definitely need to be realistic about how unsuccessful these technologies are so far. And by the way, they just provide electricity, which right now is about a fifth of the world's energy. Right. So there are lots of different kinds of energy besides electricity. So the key is the idea of them replacing fossil fuels is a horrifically destructive idea. And what happened is because people think they can replace fossil fuels, they restricted fossil fuels on the false promise that unreliable solar and wind could replace them. And that was the big mistake. People will say, hey, what's the problem with, quote, investing in green energy? Well, one is you're taking our money by force. And if it was really good, why can't it truly compete? But the other thing is the main destruction is it's used to justify all the anti-fossil fuel policies because we have this false reassurance that they'll replace fossil fuels. And that's why the green energy movement is responsible for the energy crisis.